joining us today. My name is Diane, and I'm an animal care specialist here in the Desert's Edge at Brookfield Zoo. Today we'll be talking about our marvelous mole rats. There are over 50 species of mole rats in the world, and we have 2 of those species here at Brookfield Zoo. The larger animals that we have in the top colony are called Damaraland mole rats. They are from southern Africa, and as you can see, they're very furry. They're dark brown in color with little white spots on top of their head. And they're a little bit larger. The other type we have are the more famous naked mole rats, which are in the colony below them. And these guys, as you can imagine, do not have much hair, although they do have some. They have little hairs around their faces and their feet and their tail, and those help them sense the environment around them. But both species of mole rats live underground in large colonies. And this is a very unique way for a rodent to live. Out of the 50 species of mole rats, these are the only 2 species that have a social structure where they live in groups. The others are all single animals that live on their own. So as you can see the mole rats moving around and eating and digging in their exhibit, you'll see they have lots and lots of features that help them survive underground. The first thing is their body shape. If you look at their body, you see how it's kind of shaped like a cylinder. That helps them tunnel through small spaces. You can also see that they're very, very active, and sometimes they even try to dig out of their habitat here at the zoo. They have great big, huge front teeth. Like most rodents, their teeth are ever growing, so that means they're always growing even throughout the animal's life. And they use those teeth to do the majority of the digging to create their new burrows. That's why here at the zoo, we have them set up in this colony with lots of tunnels and separate enclosures for the animals to live in. It mimics their habitat in Africa. You can see they're very busy digging, even though we have created a place for them. We can help them have stuff to do by giving them things to chew on. We fill different areas of their habitat with bedding for them to dig in, and it really provides them with a lot of enrichment to keep their day busy, very similar to how they would be in the wild. Some of their other adaptations for living underground that you may have a little bit of difficulty seeing with this camera is that they have very tiny eyes. They do have eyes, they're not blind, but their eyes are very small because they don't need them very much when they're living underground in the darkness. Mostly they just need them to maybe distinguish a little bit of light levels, or if they happen to go above ground, but that is very rare. They also have very tiny little ears, external ears. So they do still have ears, but their external portion is very tiny, and that helps them be able to tunnel better. So their ears are not sticking out and getting in the way. Those teeth also are on the outside of their mouth. So those big front teeth are outside of the skin at the front of their mouth, so they can dig with their teeth without getting dirt in their mouth. They're also able to close their nostrils to keep dirt from going in their nostrils while they're digging. So the reason they do all this digging is to keep them safe from predators. The only predator that can really reach them in the ground are snakes. It also provides them with temperature regulation because it can get very hot in parts of Africa where they live. So they can be underground where it's always stable temperature. And then that is also how they find their food. So these guys, both species, eat plants that grow underground. So roots and tubers are their main diet, and they can find those by digging in the soil. Here at the zoo, you can see these guys eating We give them carrots and sweet potatoes, and also some other fruits and vegetables just to add variety and vitamins and nutrition to their diet. And we also provide them with other things to eat, just to round out their nutrition. You can see right now they're eating some corn husks that we gave them today. When some of our other animals get ears of corn, we save the husks for the mole rats, and they enjoy tearing them up. Sometimes they use them to make a bed, other times they eat them. The naked mole rats also have little hairs between their toes that helps them dig, and it makes it so that their little feet can act like a shovel. So when they're trying to dig a tunnel, the group cooperates together. The first animal that is digging the dirt with their teeth pushes the dirt behind them, and then the animal that's behind them in the tunnel will push the dirt backwards, and then another animal behind them pushes it backwards, and they all keep pushing the dirt out until finally someone pushes it out the top, and it forms a little anthill type formation on the surface where the excess dirt goes. So because they're doing all this kicking and navigating in tunnels, they also can go just as fast backwards as they can forwards. So if you ever notice them in their tunnels, two might come into the tunnel from opposite directions, and one animal will go backwards to allow the other animal to pass by. You can see the animals here in front of the camera. They have some of the corn husk. They're also trying to dig. Sometimes they will bury the food to try and preserve it. Some other interesting facts about the naked mole rats is that they are the longest lived rodent species in the world. They can live up to 32 years in zoos and under managed care. So they're very healthy animals. One of the reasons that scientists think that's possible, it also has to do with their living underground. Because underground they don't have access to as much oxygen, they have a very low metabolic rate, which means they don't need as much oxygen to survive as a lot of other animals. So that also means that their body is not aging as much. So they tend to live much longer than animals of similar size that live above ground. So it's another great thing about living underground for them. Okay, now I'd love to take some questions if anyone has questions about the mole rats of either species that we have here.
Sure. How much do they weigh?
It depends. Obviously, you can see on the species, but also on the individual. We have quite a variation in size for both species. The naked mole rats, when they're born, they're the size of a jelly bean. And at an adult size, they can weigh between 1 and 3 ounces. So you can see if you look in the colony, there's quite a variety of different size of individuals here. The other mole rats, the Damaraland mole rats, are anywhere between 3.5 ounces till about 9 ounces. So they're a much larger animal than the naked mole rats.
Where do they live in the wild?
The Damaraland mole rats live in southern Africa and southwestern Africa. The naked mole rats live in eastern Africa. In both cases, they live in drier areas, but again, since they're living underground, they get plenty of moisture, and therefore they're able to live in these dry areas without a problem.
How many babies do they have per litter?
The Damaraland mole rats have fewer babies on average than the naked mole rats, and a little smaller colonies. They can have between 1 and 6 babies per each litter. The naked mole rats can have as many as 12 babies, or even a little more per litter.
How often do they give birth?
They are able to give birth every 3 months or so. Here in the zoo, we do not have any babies right now, but they are able to give birth every few months.
How many of each species do we have at the moment?
Right now, of the Damaraland mole rats, so the furry ones, we have 13 of those, and the naked mole rats, we have 24.
What are they chewing on right now?
That thing that they're chewing on is a piece of cork. As I mentioned before, we like to give them opportunities to chew on things. It keeps them busy, but also it helps their dental health because, like I mentioned, their teeth are always growing. So we always want to give them food or other things they can chew on to help wear their teeth down so they don't get dental problems. We also can give them small branches, and some of their food is hard so that when they eat it, it helps wear down their teeth and maintain them properly.
So we have all these animals living in this really, really big exhibit or habitat. And there's lots of tubes. I'm wondering, how long does it take you to clean it?
It takes a while. On a daily basis, we're lucky because the mole rats have one chamber that they use for all of their defecation and urination. So there's really only one chamber that's very dirty every day. So we can disassemble this structure and take off just that one chamber to wash it and disinfect it. On a day where we have to take the whole colony apart and disinfect everything, it can take a couple of hours with a group of keepers to take everything apart and wash it and put it back together.
But it sounds like you don't have to do that too often.
We don't,
That's great.
because we're fortunate enough that they keep pretty much the rest of it pretty clean as long as we take out the food that's left over.
So how long does it take for them to go from babies to adults?
It depends on the species. The babies are generally weaned, so they don't, meaning that they can survive only on adult food after about a month, but they're not fully grown until they're about a year old, and even a little older than a year for these larger species, the Damaraland mole rats.
Do they like to sleep all cuddled up in one big ball?
They do.
I guess not a ball, a heap. One
Yes.
big heap.
It's actually really cute, especially these Damaraland mole rats. When they sleep, they line up in a little row and sometimes even make a little pyramid where they all sleep together, lined up perfectly, like a display of toys or something. It's very adorable. And most mornings when the zookeepers arrive, the animals are sleeping, and they'll generally wake up after we've been here a short time. The naked mole rats generally sleep in a less organized fashion, but because of their low metabolic rate that I mentioned before, it helps them to stay warm when they snuggle up together. So they will snuggle up together a lot more frequently than the Damaraland mole rats, even though their habitat is always kept at a nice toasty temperature.
Are they nocturnal animals?
They actually seem to be active during the day. Even in their native habitat, some of the studies, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to study them because of their nature of living underground, but they do tend to be more active during the daytime hours.
Is there a reason why the Damaraland rats don't have long tails?
Probably due to their living underground. Their tail is a little bit shorter than the naked mole rats, but as you can see, the naked mole rat's tail is also not as long as it might be for a more typical rodent like a mouse or squirrel, when you're underground, you don't really need your tail for as much because you're not climbing and you don't need it for balancing yourself.
Did you already talk about why their skin is so wrinkly?
I did not, but that is a great thing to mention. Especially the naked mole rats, it's very obvious because they don't have much fur. Their wrinkly skin actually helps them navigate underground, because if they're trying to turn around in a small space, they can almost turn around within their own skin. It makes them very flexible, and they can turn around in a very tiny little spot. So it really helps them be able to move underground. Well, thanks for joining us today to meet our mole rats. They're a really fascinating species. If you want to learn more about them, when the zoo reopens, we'd be glad to have you come by and visit.